Yeah, and that's kind of stuff that jumps out at me when I'm listening to your stuff, especially this. It's wow, it's like there, like I said to you before we started, I got so excited about so many things. Oh, that's cool, that note in there, or oh, that
That is
tone
so
there,
cool. I'm so glad
or
to
the
hear that. Yeah.
production. And another thing, like you were talking about Throwdown, which was a vocal tune. There's
Hmm.
another question that comes up as far as, was this in composition? Was this in production? Like the whole tune is just flat out killer. I mean, it's high intensity. It's really cool. I love this one, and
Thank
great
you.
playing and writing. And uh, leading up to the solo section, like the main guitar is doubled. Okay, so left and right, you hear this riff.
This is Throwdown.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
leading up to the solo, you hear this riff, which is doubled, and then the note which would resolve or complete that riff is just pan center, the solo guitar,
Right.
like it finishes it. And to me,
Right.
that was just such a beautiful introduction to the solo and finishing of that riff. Now, is that
Right.
something like came about in the studio? Were you planning that when you wrote that?
Yeah. This is really good questions for. This is we're definitely in geek land at this
Oh yeah,
point.
yeah. Well, that's what this whole
No, of course. No, this is great.
series is
So
about.
this album, and that song in particular is a good example of one of the things I wanted to accomplish on this album, which was to have the production of the songs happen in a way that would lend themselves to translating live and not feeling like you lost out
Yeah.
on a bunch of stuff. Like, luckily, on the tour that I just did with Stu Ham, Stu is really good at filling it up, so we could get away with doing songs like Jumpstart, and it sort of sounded full. But
Right.
generally speaking, if I've got a keyboard player or a very important rhythm guitar part, it can sometimes feel a little empty, a little weird when you go out there as a three-piece and try to reproduce that.
Yeah.
So it was important on this album that a lot of times I would be thinking, well, I want the sonic advantage of, left and right. So I'd like to double this line. At the same time, I want the arrangement to be such that, I could pull this off live. So this is why sometimes you'll hear a unison thing happening in stereo.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time for a more line-oriented thing or melodic thing or even soloing type of thing, it suddenly goes to the middle because I'm not going to double all that.
Right.
So it's partially having a little fun in the studio, but also partially the fun being dictated by my vision of a live interpretation of it.
Right. Cool.
If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Now to continue down geek land for guitar
Mm-hmm.
players, can you talk a little bit about the technique and keys to open?
Sure. That it's very similar to the technique I use on a song called "The Delicacy," which was on the Extraction
Yeah.
disc, and actually it's exactly the same technique. So it's it's something that's so much easier than it sounds. And I'm not saying it's super easy because it's a lot of hammering with the left hand and getting these sort of pedal-esque picking patterns happening where there's a couple of notes, a couple of open strings, or even if they're not open, it's sort of a picking back and forth, arpeggiated stuff within this longer arpeggiated sequence, but not as difficult as it sounds, because it comes across sounding like intense, like finger picking.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's really just a bunch of hammer-ons with the left hand, and the perception of picking, finger picking, because of the minimal picking that's being done with the right hand. Almost impossible for me to explain it.
Right.
It's easier to just kind of demonstrate it. But the other thing about that piece is that I was using an open tuning that I literally just got the idea off of YouTube. I was like, let me see, some cool open tunings out there. Let's see what's going on. And that particular one was, I think, just about every string was the equivalent to like the low. I think I'm detuned a little bit also, but I think 5 of the strings are tuned to the same pitch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 4 or 5 of them. I'd have to go back and revisit it to remember. I don't even remember the open tuning I used. I found an open tuning, and then I just sort of was like, I feel like the album, I like to always have some acoustic moment on these albums. So
Yeah.
like, I don't have my acoustic moment. Let me just sit down and screw around. I just really started playing in front of the microphone and left the record button on for a while, and then sort of found this thing that was happening with this open tuning that felt kind of cool. It felt very, almost like it had a percussive ethnic thing to it. And it just felt like I was getting into some sort of sensible rhythmic harmony thing that was taking place. I don't even know how you would categorize the piece. But as it was starting to come into play, I was like, I kind of dig this, and it feels fresh. I don't know that I've heard anything really that sounds quite like this. So I think it offers a nice little sort of break in the monotony of high gain guitar.
Yeah.
So the technique is very similar to. It's actually exactly the same as what I've used on songs like A Delicacy.
Yeah.
Even the break in Tempest Pulse, the
first
breakdown,
one. Yeah.
Right, it's really the same kind of thing.
Right.
You probably know this, but for your younger audience, I actually came up with the term "hammer-ons from nowhere."
Yeah.
Which is now sort of
all.
And it was only because when I was doing tablature back in the day, back when I was teaching out of my house in Pennsylvania, I used to notice that there would sometimes not be notation for certain things.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, well, I want this guy to know that, like, when he's reading this and when he gets home with a piece of paper, he knows this is a hammer-on, but it's not a hammer-on in the traditional sense. What is this hammer-on comes from? Anyway, so I would come up with different terminology. That one really stuck, though.
Yeah.
And so I think it's actually pretty cool because there is a distinction now.
Yeah.
Hammer-ons from nowhere means that you weren't necessarily on the same string.
Right.
You just came down from wherever and you pounded some notes. And so, this is almost a seminar in that technique.
Yeah.
Or in illustrating what that.
It would be a great textbook study in that technique.
Of hammer-ons from nowhere.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I also wanted to mention, obviously, you listen to it and you're like, wow, that's a really cool technique. But the coolest thing about it is it wasn't just a technique. You took that into a compositional piece and it flowed. Right. And that's what, to me anyway, that's what makes it stand out. And that's what makes you want to go back and listen to that piece over and over again, as opposed to, oh, that's a cool technique. And yeah, I do this and this and this. And then after a while, it's like, oh, it didn't really take me anywhere after the first impression of, oh, that's a cool technique. But this takes you on a journey. So that makes it, to me, makes it one of those things that you want to go back and listen to more, so that was really cool.
That's great to hear. And I mean, and I'm glad it makes me feel great to hear this because it is really the goal. There's, sitting down and just impressing people. It's not really, we're artists, right? So we're trying to, we all have our own definition as to what that means. What is an artist? But to me, an artist is someone that's trying to, tap in on their creative forces in an effort to connect with people.
Yeah.
And have them recognize, have the listener or have the viewer recognize there's a common thing. We've got something together here. How do I know this? Because you're relating to what you're hearing right now.
Yeah.
and I'm playing it, and you're liking it, or you're relating to it, and that means there's a connection. I'm speaking to you in some abstract way. We're connecting, and but that has to be the goal, because we're not connecting if I'm just up there playing a bunch of stuff and with an attitude of, you can't do, look, here's the stuff you can't do.
Yeah.
That's not a connection, That's really just an exercise in self, self, just of me.
Yeah.
Exercise in ego.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, I agree. All right. Very cool. Now, I don't want to go through every tune because I have you here all day.
Sure.
But let's quick talk about the last tune, Shady Lane, and how it came about that you had Richie Kotzen do the guest vocal. Like you and I had talked about this before. I personally was fortunate enough to be able to go to a local club and see you one night, and then the next weekend go see Richie Kotzen in the same or a nearby
That's
club.
So cool.
Yeah. And this is before both of you broke, and you got, like, in my mind, this is, the local guys were world class, so it's like I gotta bust my butt just for people to even think, I can play in a club around here, but so you guys set the bar extremely high. So, like, I know you guys did some stuff together, but did you guys know each other when you were both in the club scene, or did you meet after you were on Shrapnel? And then how did that all lead back to
that's
this?
another good question. It's interesting. So going way back in the days that you're describing, which is like late 80s, when we were still a cover band and doing a lot of Van Halen stuff. And I would always hear, I was sort of, so I was the young kid that was sort of getting the reputation as the hot shot that plays too many notes. And I would always hear about Richie, who was playing in the same general area, but a different circuit. Like we just didn't, it was a different club circuit within the same general sort of region. And I would always hear about him. And people would always be, you ever hear this Richie Kotzen dude? And, and I had heard of him many times, but hadn't heard him. After I got my Shrapnel deal, Richie submitted, I guess, a demo to Mike as well.
Yeah.
And Mike asked me to get together with Richie because he said, the guy's really young. I think Richie was like 17.
Yeah,
at
something
the time.
like that.
Something really young. He said, well, he's really young, and he seems like he's really good, but I don't know. I'd like to have another set of ears in person.
Yeah.
Make sure he's not just piecing this stuff together on a demo. I want to just let me know, confirm that he's ready for prime time. So Richie came over to my house. I was still living with my mom at the time, and I remember Richie drove to my house in this, like, I think it was a convertible Corvette or something. He was already a rock star.
Yeah.
And we jammed out for a few hours, and I was like, yeah, the guy's great. What is there to? What is there to say, Mike Barney? Right. What's the question? But it was cool. We kind of hit it off. He's, we just kind of hit it off. There's certain personality types just kind of connect. And
right.
I liked Richie. He's a very, very real person. He's not a poser, and he's like the opposite of that. He's everything is the real deal. And I could tell guitar playing, as far as executing notes, it was for him, it just seemed like something that wasn't even, difficult at all. Like, yeah, okay. I don't know. I can't explain it. Like, almost like he was so good, he didn't even know how good he was. Yeah. Like, or something, or he just, he is a super talented guy. So I think a lot of times I get the sense with Richie that, like, he'd be like, I think next week I'm going to learn how to play over giant steps. I think next week I'm going to be a drummer. You know what? I think I'm going to be a singer. and just have this great soulful voice. You know, maybe I'll be an astronaut.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm going to throw the pick away and just learn how to play with my fingers. I mean, you know what I mean? He just seems like once he decides to do something, he just does it.
Yeah.
And he does it well. So, but anyway, that's how that came about. That's when I first met him. So to be honest with you, I didn't meet him until after I got signed, even though I had heard about him a lot, and he probably heard about me. And
right.
But there was never an opportunity for any like rivalry,
Yeah.
you know, young rivalry thing, because we both basically got record deals around the same exact time. So
yeah, cool. And then you had this song Shady Lane. Am I correct with that? It was an old how-to song.
That's exactly right. Yes, we wrote that song years ago, probably early '90s, '92, '93, and it's a very simple song, but everyone likes it, and it just seems like it's. I don't know. I think it's a really cool song.
Yeah.
And we just for whatever reason, had the opportunity to record it. I don't know why. I mean, I'm surprised it didn't end up on one of the how-to records. But how-to may have been written right after the how-to stuff. I think it was.
Oh, okay.
And so we really never had an official vocal recording of any type after how-to.
Right.
So yeah, it's just been sitting around. It's been sitting on the shelf, and I'm like, you know, we got to do something with this song.
Yeah.
And you know, my brother he's working on his own personal issues, and he's got things happening. So I was like, I'd like to get somebody to sing this. And originally, I wanted Michael Grimm to sing it because we were working together, and he actually did record it, and sounded, you know, phenomenal. But yeah, so I asked Richie, because once it turned out that Michael and I weren't going to be working together, I was like, all right, well, maybe Richie will sing this. And Richie was cool with it. You know, Richie was in the middle of, I think, buying a new house and, you know, just getting off the road and doing whatever he's doing. But he was like, yeah, well, I have maybe Thursday I'll just jump in there and throw it down. You know, he just gets it done. So yeah, he sent it back to me, and I thought, yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah.
You know, let's do it. And he seemed like he was happy to do it, and I think he sounds killer on it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Now, we are going to talk a little bit more about your signature guitar and your amp in the upcoming Guitar Connoisseur magazine. So I don't want to get too much into it, but having the pleasure of seeing you demo that stuff, it sounds like that is all over the CD. Is that what you used for the entire CD?
What I used for the entire CD is, almost entirely the signature guitar, mainly this one, and the 22 fret version.
Yeah.
But this one's...
Oh, yeah. That's beautiful too, yeah.
We're in the process of getting some different neck sizes, and so these are all the signature model with different colors.
Oh, great.
Flavors. But, and then the 22 fret version, which you've seen me play a lot, which is the original Bolt Classic.
Yeah.
That they sent me, that got me kind of hooked on the company. That, and then this prototype amp, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
But this is a prototype that I'm really hoping gets put out next year by DV Mark. We're negotiating that thing right now, so I don't know exactly where it's going to end up. But I know one thing: I'm in love with this amplifier, and it's a real smooth amp. It's very, it's, you know, one of the things about the British style amps is that they there's a smack you in the face wallop, unforgiving quality that a lot of them have, which is part of what makes them sound so great. But this amp has a little bit more of a rounder edges.
Yeah.
Right? It's a little bit more buttery. It's a little bit more forgiving. It's a little bit easier to get away with stuff and not feel so almost intimidated as I'm playing,
Yeah.
as with certain other amps. It's just been, yeah. So you're hearing a very basic setup. You're hearing, I will reveal that I did get into the impulse response files on this album a lot. So,
Oh, okay.
Utilizing the Sur reactive load, and then some of the basically simulated cabinets that you can get from Ownhammer and Two Notes.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so basically you're hearing a lot of simulated cabinet as opposed to a mic'd cabinet.
Oh man, because I would have not guessed that at all. They're coming a long way with that stuff.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, and you're talking to somebody who's really been, it's I don't really entertain any of that stuff. I've never really gotten into the amp modeling. I don't really, and I'm not saying I don't like it. I think a lot of these companies are doing some wonderful things, and they keep getting a little closer to having it be more authentic and feel more real, and it incrementally moves closer to that all the time. It's just that for me, there's still a big difference between even the best of those and an actual tube amp.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get me on board with just about anything that's not a tube amp. And so when I started hearing about the impulse response things, I'm like, yeah, it's going to be another one. It's the same thing. It's going to be the same type of thing. But as I thought about it, I thought, well, actually it won't be, because I'm still using my cabinet, or I'm sorry, my head.
Right.
I can still turn it way up. I can still push the output stage and, let the amp really start to work. It's a small investment to find out whether or not this is cool. But when I started seeing people like Pete Thorne and Scott Henderson really getting behind the technology, and Scott saying things like, I think I'm going to do my whole next album with these IRs. I was like, well, I should check into this thing.
Yeah.
Because, guys like that these are tone connoisseurs. These are the real deal tone guys. And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe that it felt and sounded just like a mic speaker cabinet. And the weird thing is that in some cases it sounded more real than my, 57 or 906 on a speaker.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but along this line, one of the many questions that I put to the side was, to me, it just sounded like a mic cabinet. However, it sounded like a really good. I was going to ask you, how much time did you spend placing the mic? Because there's an art in micing your cabinet properly. And this just sounded like a mic cabinet, but it sounded like the best possible sweet spot, Yeah. So it's funny that you say that, but it sounds great. I thought it was mic'd and done very well.
I appreciate that, and I have a feeling this technology is going to be the real deal, because the thing is, it's not. You're still getting to use your amp.
Yeah.
So I don't know how these files work. I really don't. It blows my mind, because even within the software, as you're listening to it, you can make adjustments. You can move the virtual mic away from the speakers. You can adjust the mic placement. You can change the mic to a different. There's a bunch of different microphones you can have. You can have two separate cabinets mic'd and have the mic differently with different mics in different locations, different speakers, different speaker cabinets, open back, closed back, vintage 30s, the greenback. So there's a way more variety. Now suddenly I've got a high-end amplifier. I've got my Germino, or I've got my Cornford, I've got one of my old Fenders or anything. I've only really ever been used to hearing them through one cabinet. Now I'm like, wait a second, what does this thing sound like? I've never heard this through an open back 212 before. I've never heard this through two 412 cabinets at the same time. And actually, in a certain way, you get more use out of your amplifier, because it's like, wow, I didn't know my amp could do this, because I'd never heard it through a 110.
Right.
I never heard it through this thing. So now, wow, I like this amp for a whole another reason now. So it allows for the expansion of like the multi purposes that these amps can now have. So if if one day I have a gigantic house with a huge live room where every single kind of speaker cabinet can be mic'd up with every different kind of mic, that would be probably a step above what this is. But in the meantime, this is absolutely the next best thing.
Yeah, it sounds killer. It sounds killer. Well, let's. I know I don't want to keep you too long on this portion of it, cool. But just a quick thing. What do you have plans for the upcoming? What's next? Like, do you know if you want to go vocal, instrumental? Because I'm just speaking as a fan now. Like, I really dug the Marigold stuff, and I know you were working with Mike Grimm, and I was looking forward to hearing what that was. But then when I listened to Wheelhouse, like I said, I was all excited, and I was like, oh, it's great to hear him do instrumental stuff again. And then you close it out with Shady Lane, then I find myself going, oh, it'd be great to hear him do a vocal. So what do you say to, how do you feel about what's coming next, and what do you say to fans who want to hear more of both from you?
Man, you have some of the best questions, honestly.
Well, thanks.
They're questions that I'm asking myself all the time. So, again, I don't want to try to steer things in a certain way. I like to sit in the boat and see where the flow is kind of taking me.
Right.
Once I see where it's going, then maybe I'll start to
paddle.
Exactly. But in a perfect world for me, there would be a lot of stuff. I would have a band that would be basically like, when I describe my perfect band, my ultimate, band, it would be a pretty stripped down thing that would sound a lot like this new album. A lot of sort of Tower Power type compositions, but without all the horns and stuff.
Yeah.
And then a vocalist that would come in sometimes, and maybe not even all the time, and with like extended improv sections, sophisticated funk, sophisticated soul and funk and rock, blend.
Yeah.
Not difficult. It's almost like if I don't know, it's like I picture like if Lenny Kravitz had lines in his songs that were like unison lines and stuff that could easily steer off into a cool instrumental vamp. I don't know. I feel like there is a way. Sorry.
No problem.
It's hard to put it into words. If you can imagine, there is a center point somewhere between Marigold and the new album. There is a place where it could all work, where everything could work. For instance, the song, like I mentioned, a couple of the tunes that are on the album, like Throwdown and even 2 in 1, which was originally supposed to be a vocal tune. Let It Slip, I Wonder. These are all songs that were where I was sort of playing around with the idea that maybe there'll be vocal tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an easy way to get vocals into that thing and maintain everything that thing is now.
Yeah.
So I think that I could satisfy both, because both are my cravings too. I want the instrumental part of that. I like doing that, but I also like the vocal thing. And but I think there's a way to marry that together.
Have you ever? It's anyone who's been doing music for any length of time knows that it's difficult to have individual musicians on the same page, schedule-wise, thought process-wise, work ethic-wise, for an extended period of time. So have you ever thought of, I'll just do a solo album, which will be half vocal, half instrumental. I'll bring different vocalists in for the vocals. And then when I go on the road, I have one vocalist come out and sing. Like sometimes you think that might be more manageable than putting a whole band together and trying to keep everyone happy and in the same direction.
It would be more manageable. Yes, absolutely. It would be more manageable. And that is what I think about. What you're describing is really what I think about all the time. That's, when I think about even this album, I think I'm pleased with how it came out, but I would not have been, it would not have felt like too much or too out of context if we had 2 or 3 vocal tunes literally on the album.
Yeah.
With the same kind of, musical backdrop that you're hearing as the instrumental songs now.
Exactly, yeah.
But that would not have felt out of line to me at all. It would have felt, I think if anything, there's maybe a bit of a void overall in the music world for that kind of thing. I think I would go see that if someone else was doing it.
Yeah. That's cool. Very cool. Well, whatever it is, we're all looking forward to what comes next. Hopefully there's going to be more touring with Behind the Wheelhouse thing. And
there will be.
Yeah, great,
sure.
Great. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. This has been awesome. And like I said, the upcoming Guitar Connoisseur magazine will get more into your amp and guitars, which play a huge role on this CD. Sounds fantastic. All right,
Excellent.
Greg. Well, thank you very much. And
my pleasure.
Look forward to it next time.
All right, Rod. Take care.
All right, take care.
You got it.